What Leo didn't say was that I think that both of our favorite jobs was teaching, and Leo was an amazing mentor to me in terms of my learning how to teach high school students. But the enduring notion that with the kind of effort and resources, all kids can succeed, and our inner city kids at Clara Barton High School would repeatedly go on to either win or place or show in constitutional debates all throughout America. And that, if that doesn't give you an enduring sense of what you can do when kids really are engaged, nothing does. So thank you, Leo, for having the kind of patience with me as a new teacher, and for the kind of work that you've done both in classrooms as well as here in the AFT leading the Shanker Institute. Thank you very, very much. I also want to, look, we told the secretary that we were doing this, and you can see his, his instinct about wanting to help us mobilize in new and different ways. And I'm so grateful that he was here with us for a bit. And I'm also really, really grateful to the American Prospect and the Hillman Foundation for co-sponsoring this with us, and for all of you being here, because as this says, we need to learn a lot. And so we have a lot of panels here. Teferi is with us from the AFL-CIO, and we also have, as the secretary said, one of the Gupta sisters, and we also have other kinds of models of organizing, like Sarah Horowitz in terms of the freelancers. And so we have a lot of people here who can help give us a lot of food for thought, because that's where we are, and that's what we need to do if we really believe in the kind of collective action that our movement is about. So let me start by saying, the secretary said this too, our history in the United States is pretty rich in terms of the fight back. We fight back against inequality, we fight for justice and opportunity, we fight, and have fought to create the New Deal, the Great Society, equal rights for women, civil rights, LGBTQ rights, all of that, as most in this room know, was won with the critical support of the American labor movement. I'd add public education as well. But think about it. Today, our movement is at a crossroads. Globalization, technical or technological changes, and technical changes, and all the other changes, diminished union density, and a view, frankly, that we are an antiquated brand, and an aggressive, well-funded campaign, legislatively and judicially, by anti-union forces to break our infrastructure. Right to work, paycheck deception, Harris v. Quinn, Fredericks versus CTA. I don't frankly have to tell those in this audience the many challenges our movement faces. You know it and see it and feel it every day. But at the same time, as the secretary also just said, workers need a voice more than ever. Decades of wage stagnation, rising economic inequality, shrinking middle class, devastating student debt, dwindling retirement security, jobs that are constantly shifting, contingent labor being the norm, not the exception, collective bargaining being the exception, not the norm. The first generation that's doing worse than their parents, working families feeling squeezed, 1 out of every 2 students in public education being poor. Every single one of the workers and children in this society need a voice. They need us, and we need them. So the question becomes, how can we revitalize the American labor movement to face these challenges, be the voice that working people want, and the robust engine that our economy needs? Are we flexible enough, forward-thinking enough to meet the demands of the 21st century economy and the 21st century workforce? Can our infrastructure, the labor movement's infrastructure, adopt and adapt to meet the needs of a new generation and new generations? And make no mistake, this is on us. It's our responsibility. Sure, we've faced assaults from the Walmarts and the Koch brothers and the Alex and the Scott Walkers and the Sam Alitos and the hedge funders. They all understand the potential power, the promise of American labor, which is why they do what they do, to try to kill us. But we can't simply focus on what they have done. We must focus on what we should do. We can't lose sight of the power of a movement of labor, of the solidarity of working folks. We've retooled before. As, you know, the secretary outed me as a high school teacher. And so forgive me for a minute. Look at the 1920s. The ranks of the American labor movement were decimated at that time. Unbridled corporate power was skyrocketing. Totalitarian states had destroyed, in the United States, I'm not talking about internationally, had destroyed independent labor movements that had developed here in a nascent way, as well as that had developed abroad. But rather than accepting its fate at that time, the American labor movement at that time, lots of different ways, not with Twitter, not with Facebook, not with email, but we developed a vision and a strategy for renewal that would lead, as you all know, we all talk about it, in 2 decades to our height when 1 out of 3 workers were in the American labor movement. When confronted with a new era of American capitalism dominated by mass industries like auto and steel, American unions developed a model of industrial unionism that revived and reinvigorated the labor movement and made it a force for decades of social, economic, and political reforms. That force that we talk about all the time as the one behind the curtain, Bayard Rustin, A. Philip Randolph, on and on and on. And today, as we face a new global economy, one centered much less on industry and much more on knowledge, we must again develop a new model of unionism for the 21st century. And it may not be monolithic, it may be a lot of different models, but all aligned. We are in the technology era, moving at the speed of light. We can't operate any longer like we're in a factory. The knowledge era is here. And as circumstances change, as our nation changes, as our world changes, we must change too. Now, I'm sure a few of you are thinking, because this always happens when I raise these kind of issues, okay, if we abandon industrial unionism, we're waving the white flag. Please. Have you ever known me to wave the white flag? We will never surrender our values. But at the same time, we can't conflate industrial unionism with the labor movement itself. Our strategies and our tactics are different than our values. We believe that the labor movement should provide a collective voice to working people, and that means organizing. We believe that to provide a collective voice, the labor movement has to foster solidarity and democracy in our ranks, promoting member activism. We believe that the labor movement should organize for economic justice, political power, and dignity for all working people. We believe that the labor movement should organize for social justice, seeking dignity for all rather than prosperity for a few. That's not anything, that's something that probably everybody in this room could say, because everybody in this room feels. But when you believe in economic and education justice and opportunity, when you believe in democracy, in voting rights and social justice, then what that also does is it leads you not simply to fight, but to work to ensure that all communities have access to quality public services, which is part of the reason we do a lot of the work that the Secretary referred to. So these enduring values are not just values that underlie the UIW, the AFL-CIO, SEIU. These are values that underlie us at the AFT. And these are values that I think can help us think about a new paradigm of unionism. And so let me just briefly talk about the four kind of pillars that have been ours in terms of thinking about that new unionism. Number one is our engagement with community. Number two is our focus on the quality of public services our members provide. Number three is our internal organizing and member mobilization. And number four is our external organizing of the unorganized. I'll talk about all these very briefly and then I'll go off the stage. On community engagement, as our nation, our pendulum has constantly swung from individualism to collectivism and back again. I know collectivism is not the word anybody uses anymore, but think about what Hillary Clinton said. It takes a village. That's collectivism. Over the past decades, the idea of collective voice and action has been undermined in the name of innovation, disruption, globalization. And that's led to more working families feeling squeezed, even after they've worked hard and played by the rules. And I do believe that the pendulum is swinging back, or starting to swing back. It's starting to swing back, and you do see this notion of it takes a village again, this notion of collectivism. You see this in the Fight for 15, in the Wisconsin State House, with Occupy, with the movement after Ferguson, with this incredible show of solidarity this week in France. But these are streaks of activism, moments of engagement. They are not movements. The impulse for unity, the impulse for peace, the impulse for democracy, for liberty, for the ladder of economic and education opportunity, it's there. We see it, we feel it. It's not just what you've seen in Paris this week or in the Arab Spring. You see it on Twitter every nanosecond. People do want to come together. So our challenge collectively, and that's part of this conference today, is how do we work together to build new movements, build a new vision for collective action. So in our judgment, that means that community must become the new density of American unionism. We can no longer focus, as industrial unionism did, exclusively on the workplace, or rely on our own density to set market standards, raise wages, or improve conditions. Today, public education, between the NEA and the AFT, has the greatest union density of any major sector of the American economy. But for us, a singular focus on the four walls of the schoolhouse does not work. We need a new approach, one that builds power through partnership with community. And that's what many of our locals and our national is doing and are doing. We're trying to build organic relationships with community, relationships that are not transactional, but a real two-way street. And we're working to rethink how we re-engage community in everything we do. Later, Mary Catherine Ricker, the AFT's executive vice president, will describe how her local in St. Paul, Minnesota, made community into active participants in the negotiation for a collective bargaining agreement. You all know this in terms of the success of the strike in Chicago. They made it about nurses and guidance counselors and what community needed, not about wages and benefits. The Alliance to Reclaim Our Schools, and on and on and on. Second, solution-driven unionism. The AFT is a public service union, as Leo just said, with members in education, healthcare, and local government. From austerity to privatization, we find ourselves on the front lines of these battles daily, ensuring the quality of the services we provide is key, not only to fending off these attacks, but to also providing the ladder of educational opportunity, the ladder of economic opportunity. Quality can no longer be the province of management, as it was within the framework of industrial unionization. Then, you remember this, unions negotiated wages, working conditions, and due process. Not that that is wrong. Those are absolutely vital to have a middle class, to have voice. But the employer alone decided how to organize and deliver goods and services. And with that employer's prerogative, the employer also limited the voices and the ideas of those closest to the work. So part of what we're doing in terms of the ambit of professionalism is we're trying to secure a voice for our members in the important decisions of their workplace, be it a school or a hospital, a daycare center, a government office, or a university, knowing full well that when our members have that kind of voice and agency, they will not only make the work better, they'll not only have more satisfaction in the work, but ultimately the people we serve will be served better because of their voice. A virtuous circle. So take New York City. This last contract, the UFT negotiated prose schools in which school staffs can adopt educational innovations that waive Department of Education in New York City or contractual regulations with a supermajority of about 65%. Real teacher voice in their school's education direction. Flexibility in exchange of voice so that there is a real expression and direction very different than the industrial style of unionism. So that's what we call solution-driven unionism. I make up the name. It came from ABC School District, where labor management collaboration is a reality. And it's rooted in solving problems, not winning arguments. It's about building the power we need to negotiate as real partners. It takes power to stand up for our values. It takes power to find common ground. It takes power to fight back and to fight forward. It's a both and that's how you move forward. So even as we're under attack, as budgets are cut, as services are privatized, we're focused on an agenda of advancing a proactive quality agenda that will help all students succeed. And you hear that from us all the time when we talk about we're reclaiming the promise of public education so that we can invest and have strong neighborhood public schools that are safe, collaborative, and welcoming environments for students, for parents, for educators, for the broader community. We have an agenda that talks about how schools and school staffs have to be well prepared for the job that they are about to do. They have to be well supported. They have to have manageable class sizes and time to collaborate. But they also have to have rigorous standards that focus and are aligned on engaging curriculum, that focus on teaching and learning, not on testing, that include art and music, civics and sciences, where all kids' instructional needs are met. And before somebody starts saying, as I go through this list, oh, this is a pipe dream, every school that does this in the United States has turned around and has done well for kids. And for every school that somebody can show me that's failing, I will show them a school like this. We can do this, but it does require having a voice and also a responsibility to take on and to solve problems and to find common ground. Member mobilization. A union and its members are stronger when we know that we are together. Remember that old ditty, union is us? A union is its members, and it's strongest when its members are active and engaged. When our adversaries are trying to divide members from their union, an active membership provides a needed counterweight. Look in Michigan, in the face of the new right-to-work law and concerted anti-union campaigns that encourage this kind of free riding, or basically breaking our infrastructure, the AFT successfully signed up 92% of our workers in our collective bargaining units. ASME talks about how they had a goal of 50,000, and they're up to, Lee tells me, 130,000 in terms of even more than that, as Paul just says. But to fully engage our members, we can't just be service providers, a model that defined industrial unionism. The relationship between a union and its members can't be transactional or contractual. It has to be transformational. It has to be a real movement. And we have to adopt an organizing model that focuses on activating and empowering members through collective action. And the model can go beyond workplace actions and job actions. It's far harder to marginalize the pre-K teacher on the front lines talking about why she needs paid sick leave, something the president's going to talk about today, or the ER nurse explaining why she needs the best training to provide the best services. And that empowerment becomes catalytic in terms of the life of a local union when you get there. So membership activism and mobilization is particularly important with the millennial generation. On the whole, millennials are more politically progressive and open to collective action, more insistent that their voice be included in important workplace decisions. Vast income inequality and work and college debt, crippling college debt, are their norm, and they want to change it. And even though we can be, the American labor movement can be the change agent, as adjuncts and graduate students see, they need to be actively won over by the labor movement and our unions. And to do this, we have to engage them in ways that reflect their preferred modes of communication, small informal gatherings, and digitally through social media. Social media has extraordinary organizing potential, and the labor movement needs to adapt them in our work. Some of you know that I am not just an evangelist for social media and organizing amongst millennials. While I still believe real, not virtual contact is best, I do my best to walk that social media walk, spending an inordinate amount of time, everyone in my life reminds me, communicating with AFT members on Twitter and Facebook. I think it's important for our membership activism, for mobilization in the AFT, that its national union president be accessible to her rank and file, and the presence and my presence on social media, even though I, like almost anybody else, don't like the invective that is hurled. That makes it possible. It starts creating that trust and that engagement. Last piece. Every worker deserves a voice. And so new organizing becomes essential not only for those currently in unions, but also for the welfare of all working people. At the AFT, new organizing has allowed us to grow our membership. I actually very rarely say this anymore, because we've grown during this period of time when teacher unions and public sector unions and private sector unionism has been under serious and terrible assault. Jessica Smith will talk about much of that in a little while, so I don't want to actually talk about it now. She will talk about a lot of that. But that's what a lot of you are going to talk about later on today, too. Traditional workplace organizing along the lines of industrial unionism is not the best fit for the current landscape of American work and the American worker. Does it sometimes still work? Of course, but we need to be broader. And while we at the AFT have had some success using different approaches in different contexts, we are still in the early stages of this experimental work and are just beginning to draw lessons from it, from our own work, and from the work of so many people who are about to speak this morning and this afternoon. Many of us are trying to confront these new realities so we can help workers and their families fulfill the same goals and aspirations we had when we joined the American labor movement. The renewal of our movement is no small undertaking. We can't be glib about the challenges before us or claim quick, easy victories that fool ourselves and that fool others, that transformation is not needed. We must figure out how old and new power come together to be real power. Workers need it. Our members need it. Working families need it. We know from our history, we know from the power we see every day about working people coming together and speaking out that renewal can take place. We know that the enduring values of the American labor movement provide a strong foundation for renewed American unionism that will give collective voice to working people in the 21st century global knowledge economy. We know that the building blocks of a renewed American labor movement are to be found within this room, in the new thinking, the new organizing, the new strategies that have developed not only in our ranks, but in all of your ranks. That's why this conference became totally and completely oversubscribed, and we had to move it. We know that the critical process is drawing upon this new thinking, this new organizing, these new strategies can help us build something just like in the 1920s, where we actually do what we need to do to help people pave the highway to a better, a fairer American dream. Thank you very much.